Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and we just got a very interesting cryptic teaser for Zelda's 40th anniversary, and everyone's spinning their heads around this trying to figure it out. We don't know exactly what it is, but we're trying to decode it. It's really interesting. This is coming from someone who is an insider, who has consistently teased things about Nintendo in the past and gotten many things correct. So many of us, most of us, who have been paying attention, do believe this is a legitimate leak. Of course, until confirmed, still take it with a grain of salt, but this one, in my opinion, definitely means something. What is that something? That's what we're trying to figure out today. Before jumping into it though, let me just point out I have this big goal to get to someday, which is to hit 100,000 subscribers. When will I get there? Probably a while from now, but if you do find yourselves enjoying my videos, and if you haven't subscribed already, I would very much appreciate your subscription. So the tease is coming from Nintendo. Nintendo has teased many things in the past about Nintendo, about the Ocarina of Time remake, about the Switch 2 launch plans, and so much more. One big example of Nintendo getting things right is what Nintendo pointed out recently. Looks like the Zelda 40th Anniversary Special Edition console and controller have fully leaked. For anyone curious about the cryptic post I made in July, a few months ago, this is the code right here, 00840Z::B, G. Here it's explained, BEE008 had to do with the Switch 2 Pro Controller model number, 40Z had to do with the Zelda 40th Anniversary, and BGG had to do with the colors black, gold, green, and now we have all of these images that have leaked for the Zelda Switch 2 console and Pro Controller that are coming out for the 40th Anniversary. This is leaked by Nintendo. Here's a tweet. It's still out there publicly. This is the receipt on July 10th. So this is just an example of Nintendo leaking things or teasing things ahead of time before we have more information on it, official or just blatantly leaked with photos like this. But now everyone's freaking out about this latest tease that came out yesterday, where Nintendo said, level very Zelda, ::OTO, and people have been trying to figure it out. A lot of people have come to the conclusion that OTO could mean one-to-one, perhaps for the Ocarina of Time remake, suggesting that the Ocarina of Time remake is one-to-one. However, many people started talking about this, including Mike Odyssey, and Nintendo actually responded to Mike Odyssey's theory that that's what the tease is about, even though Mike Odyssey was suggesting he doesn't believe that the Zelda remake should be one-to-one, and Nintendo said can confirm it specifically is not hinting at that. So for those thinking that this tease has to do with the Ocarina of Time remake being one-to-one, Nintendo has indicated that that is not the case. So those theories about this having to do with it being one-to-one, nope, OTO doesn't seem to be standing for that. And something I will say here is that maybe we should not be assuming this has to do with the Ocarina of Time remake. There are a variety of other things that could be happening for Zelda's 40th anniversary, like, for example, literally, this Zelda-themed Switch 2 console and Pro Controller that are coming out. That's not specifically for Ocarina of Time, just for Zelda's 40th anniversary. Nintendo already teased the Zelda Ocarina of Time remake months ago. This could be for something else coming out for the 40th anniversary. How often are Nintendo teases having to do with the content of a game as opposed to just another announcement? It's usually just another announcement, so that is a direction I am leaning in. However, other people had different ideas. For example, PandyFackler6 said maybe level equals dungeons, OTO equals one-to-one. We've already debunked that part, or Nintendo debunked it themselves, but here PandyFackler says, like, the overall will be changed, but the dungeons are virtually identical to the N64 ones. I'll say that if they did do something like this, I wouldn't necessarily be against it. I do believe the Ocarina of Time remake is going to be the most ambitious reworking by Nintendo ever. I think there's a reason why they've consistently talked about it being reborn on Switch 2 and haven't just come out right out of the gate saying that it's a one-to-one remake as it did with the Star Fox one. I know there are people out there saying, oh, but Nintendo has referred to Skyward Sword being reborn before or Star Fox being reborn before, but those are just referencing single tweets and not entire marketing campaigns. When it comes to Ocarina of Time on the Nintendo website, within the metadata of the website, in magazine articles, on Twitter, and in the Direct themselves, they've consistently referred to this as being reborn. That terminology, that messaging has never been so consistent for any other prior Nintendo game, as far as I know, in the history of literally everything. So I do think this is something different. I do think we're looking at something very ambitious here, but maybe they could have one-to-one dungeons with revamped boss fights and everything would just look really good, and then the overworld and side quests and stuff and the story stuff, maybe that's where there are some changes. I wouldn't be opposed to that necessarily, but based off what Nintendo has said about it not being to one, it seems like I wouldn't be thinking in that direction. Now, another interesting idea that I would say by this point is already disproven, at A. Kokonas, the word Eve is in between the dashes indicates something tomorrow Zelda related, because they were looking at E between L and L for level, suggests them thinking that maybe these weren't actually L's, but considering that nothing has actually happened today, I'm recording this literally a day later, probably not that. Also, yeah, I think this is just the word level and not Eve between two dashes here. Now, Lucas Miranda theorized that level very Zelda it would actually mean level design is very Zelda-like. The colon dash colon would actually mean not negation and OTO equaling 1-to-1. Here they say the level design will feel like classic 3D Zelda, but it won't be 1-to-1, which would be interesting, and maybe that is what Nintendo is getting at here. But I am kind of skeptical because I'm not sure this is actually about the Ocarina of Time remake, at least not in terms of content about the game, at least not in terms of direct content in the game. But maybe. This is what I'm theorizing about what the game will be. We shall see. Now, at Goobler Steven suggests that there's a pattern. There's 3 of something in each section. There's the colon dash colon, OTO, and level very Zelda. I can't seem to figure out what the pattern could mean, but it seems deliberate. Steven Goobler continues, new theory. Haha, there's 3 of everything and 9 in total. So September 9th, a Thursday for the Nintendo Direct where we see Ocarina of Time? Shoot, I meant September 3rd. Haha. I'll say September 3rd or September 9th would make sense for dates for a Nintendo Direct, a Thursday or a Wednesday. Usually we see Nintendo Directs sometime between the Tuesday or Thursdays for weeks when they do happen, so it's certainly plausible. I don't know if that's what they're getting at. Nintendo usually isn't teasing direct dates, at least not with cryptic tweets like this. So I'm skeptical that that's what this is, but of course let me know what you all think in the comments below if this has more to do with an event that Nintendo is teasing as opposed to some kind of product or content in the game. However, there's some more interesting theories here. At Tyrone with the many 9s, the colon dash colon might be the Amiibo logo. Level very Zelda could refer to a Princess Zelda chic, while OTO means sound in Japanese. So maybe we're getting an Amiibo of Zelda playing the ocarina or Sheik playing the harp, which I think is an interesting point here. We have heard from Special Nick that there are supposed to be Zelda Amiibos coming out, which, you know, I don't really feel like is a crazy thing to say, but Special Nick has also gotten many things right, leaked a variety of things, including the Ocarina of Time remake itself, and also was one of the first to talk about there being a special Zelda-themed console and Pro Controller, and they've also talked about there being Zelda Amiibo. There being a Sheik Amiibo and a Zelda Amiibo where they're playing instruments, I think is an interesting idea here. Maybe that's what we're referring to, and this would be a new product. Perhaps that is what Nintendo is teasing here, which I think makes sense. I do kind of feel like Nintendo is likely teasing another product as part of Zelda's 40th anniversary, and it could be the Amiibo. Now, at JJ Lars 92 suggested, every level of Zelda Ocarina of Time is orchestrated. Honestly, this is just my hope. Orchestrated Zelda music is amazing. And I'll also say, my friend, Nate, Nintendo Prime, also talked about in his own video on this subject, which will be linked in the description below, that perhaps this could have to do with some kind of compilation of Zelda music coming out for the anniversary. Oftentimes with the big Zelda anniversaries, the 25th, the 30th, the 35th, there are concerts, so maybe there is going to be a new concert series. I've been really hoping for this. And maybe alongside of it, there will be a full album coming out with a whole bunch of Zelda music. Now, one consideration with this idea is that Nintendo has been putting out this big hard push for Nintendo music where they're releasing a whole bunch of different songs. So that may discourage them wanting to put out like a whole album as part of the anniversary. Now, that doesn't mean they can't do both, but I do wonder if that's something they would want to focus on. I do hope this means that this would discourage them from doing a concert series, because that's like an event, which is not the same thing as just listening to music on an app. Especially if they're orchestrating everything, that's going to be something different, right? But then with that in mind, maybe that's the idea, that they would be orchestrating everything, so perhaps it could be an album, and that's not necessarily something that would be on Nintendo Music. Of course, I would then also consider that with this Ocarina of Time remake, they would be redoing, reworking, and fully orchestrating everything music-wise in Ocarina of Time, which would then have you considering the possibility of them adding that to Nintendo Music, but also perhaps that gives them more license to put out a full soundtrack album as part of the Zelda 40th anniversary celebration. But maybe it's something special where it's not necessarily about Ocarina of Time, but just orchestrating a whole bunch of classic Zelda songs throughout the history of the series, which would make sense to celebrate the anniversary. Ocarina of Time, while being maybe one of the most important games in the series, if not the most important, is just one game in the series. The anniversary should be celebrating the whole series, not just one game. Now, another theory about what this tease may have to do with, as said here by Check Twit News, Zelda exclusive direct focused on time-limited things for the 40th. That's what I read, and frankly, what I'm expecting. I don't think there'll be a general direct in September this year, and they'll hype Zelda to carry through the end of Q3. I've considered this possibility, by the way, that we won't have a typical direct, and rather Nintendo will put out a big 40th anniversary presentation, and then just kind of do like preview events and game exclusive directs for their other games like Switch Sports and the Dust Bloods, and then just have a couple Shadow Drop announcements. The big issue with this idea, though, is that we don't have anything for the beginning of next year. There are no dates for anything specifically. We know about Xenoblade Genesis, and we know about Pokemon Winds and Waves, but we need release dates, and also for some smaller titles to come out early on in the year, and we don't even have dates for November or December games either, and I do expect there to be at least one or two more smaller things announced to come out before the end of this year directly from Nintendo. So with that in mind, there's actually kind of a lot of announcements that do need to be made by Nintendo, so I think there probably still needs to be some kind of general direct. Perhaps they can get away with some special directs like a Zelda 40th Anniversary Direct, a partner showcase, and maybe a Switch Sports and Dust Bloods Direct, which would be a lot of cool things, but not necessarily a general direct, and then just have like a Twitter Direct in December or early January to carry us through until February, where they could have an earlier direct. That is plausible. But if I had to bet, I think we're probably going to be getting a big general in September. There's just so much for Nintendo to talk about, not just first-party wise, but third-party wise, perhaps more so than any other prior generation. Now, one more thing I'll point out, I got an email about this cryptic tweet from Joe. I won't say anything more. Shoutouts to you, Joe. Thank you for sending to me this. I don't know if this is something that you're intentionally giving me information on, that you actually know about, or if it's just your own idea. Regardless, shoutouts to you. Here they say level equals even, vary equals more, and then Zelda. So level vary Zelda means even more Zelda. OTO would mean October 21, even more Zelda coming October 21st. That's an interesting idea. Maybe we're gonna have the September Direct, the big general direct, but there will be a Zelda presentation, perhaps an Ocarina of Time specific Nintendo Direct on October 21st, which could be a few weeks away from when Ocarina of Time would actually be coming out in November as we expect, which would be in line with when we get those game-specific directs before the game would be coming out, that 3 to 6 week window, usually. And there could still be a big general direct where half of it is announcing 40th anniversary plans. There probably would still be a trailer then for Ocarina of Time, just not them telling us everything there is to know before the game would be coming out. They would wait until maybe this special Ocarina of Time Direct in October, and they talk about other Zelda 40th anniversary things, and they have the other half of the Direct just being a general Direct, very similar to how they handled the general Direct last September in 2025, where half of it was about Mario's 40th anniversary and the other half was everything else. There are various possibilities here. I wish I could tell you a theory I have that I'm very confident in. I'm not. I'll simply say, based off what Nintendo has said themselves, I don't think this is indicating the Ocarina of Time remake is one-to-one, and I also think this isn't necessarily for Ocarina of Time. I'm actually thinking this has more so to do with teasing another product, a part of the 40th anniversary, maybe something having to do with sound, if OTO does have to do with sound, the Japanese word. Another possibility, if we take a look at the tease from July, the last few letters of that tease had to do with colors. Could OTO have to do with some sort of colors? I'm kind of skeptical of that because I can't think of any other color beyond orange for O, maybe opal or something, and then T for teal. I just don't think that's what they're getting at here, and that doesn't feel very Zelda. Also, there's no commas here as there was for this one, so probably not having to do with colors. Perhaps it is sound. I don't think it would be for Ocarina of Time because that would be OOT, not OTO. Of course, maybe there is a play around with the order of words here, as this part here may also have to do with. My big guess, though, is that this is teasing another product of some kind for the 40th anniversary. Maybe it has to do with Zelda music stuff, maybe a concert, maybe an album release, maybe Ocarina of Time amiibos. But I do understand how some people might think it's game related because they do say level very Zelda. So maybe it is a tease about the Ocarina of Time remake. Although maybe there's another Zelda game they could be getting at here. Something new, maybe a small spin-off, maybe like a Zelda 99 kind of thing. There are so many possibilities. Really, it's hard to guess what this is, but that's kind of the fun of it. What do you all think, though? Tell me your theories in the comments below. What are you confident about, if you're even confident at all? This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I will see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.